recording. Good work. Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Politics, Culture, and some other shit. I'm delighted to be able to have a chat with my comrade and party colleague as well. That's true to say, isn't it? Páidí McNicholl. And we're going to talk about the Lough Neagh, and more importantly, what's happening on Sunday. Welcome, Páidí. How are you?
Thanks very much, Andy. Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. So we're going to talk about the March for Clean Water, which is happening on Sunday, this Sunday, the 2nd of November, leaving 2 p.m. Raider Square, and it's in conjunction with with Fergal Sharkey's National March for Clean Water, which is happening in London at the same time. So do you want to give us a bit of info on that, Paddy?
Yeah, no bother at all, Andy. It's good you mentioned Fergal there because he is a big factor in this. I'll just start by saying when the whole Lough Neagh crisis kicked off, well, it's been a crisis long in development, but when it hit at the national headlines last summer, we actually managed to get Fergal over to Derry as part of the Think Left conference, and so it was quite. It was only a few months after the blue-green algae, raised its head in the capacity that it did last year. And it was great to have a son of Derry, back speaking, not as a musician, but speaking out about this catastrophe. And what Fergal has been campaigning for, in England is brilliant. I think it was Eamon McCann last summer that said Fergal's music may be great and what he's contributed to the musical landscape's great, but what he's done with people power and fighting for nature is a whole other level. And I think that the momentum that you're seeing for the March for Clean Water in London at the moment is a testament to that. They have similar problems to us here, but also problems in a whole different direction with their totally private water industry there. And it's due to, both greed, water companies, totally failing the population, and just the widespread environmental catastrophe over there with the rivers and the amount of pollution flowing into rivers, and the CEOs and the personnel within these water companies getting paid so well despite this, that they've called this march. And so we have been tying in with Fergal and others over there and trying to not only help tie in and sort of signal boost what they're fighting for, but also to show that it's not just over there that this problem persists, it's here as well. And we also have our own crisis of water, which does share some stuff with what they're going through, but also we have things, when you factor in colonialism, when you factor in just a partition and all these other facets, we have actually a whole other smorgasbord of problems with our water here. That's just the wee intro on the march. So both of them are going to be this Sunday, 3rd of November.
3rd of November. I said the 2nd at the start. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
didn't even
So
catch that.
yeah, neither did I. So I do find it interesting. I was listening to Fergal Sharkey talking. I can't remember if it was in person or if it was on an online thing, but I remember his awareness first came to light about the state of the road, because he lives in England, obviously, and he took up angling, and it was going out and getting involved in angling that first made him aware of this state of the rivers. And in his very short time of being an angler, a fisherman, a river fisherman, um, the problems of the waterways where he lived first came to light. And I do find it interesting, some of the meetings that we've been to, you and I together, that the fisher the angling community, not the fishermen, not the Lough Neagh fishermen who fish for eels. That's a different thing. I'm talking about the anglers, the hobbyists. They call themselves the first like emergency service when it comes to the state of the waters. They're the first people to become aware of the spills and the other incidents that happen on the rivers.
Absolutely, Andy. And just to add to that, they, for the rallies that we've held since last year, we've been holding with the Save Lough Neagh campaign rallies nonstop, and the one consistent participant every time is the anglers, the Ulster Angling Federation. There's the Crumlin Anglers. Pretty much every angling group across I think it's, what is it, six or eight inlets or tributaries in the Lough Neagh have their own organizations and groups that have been raising the alarm. They really are the canary in the coal mine,
Yeah.
and they are the first ones to see not only the effects of blue-green algae, but the sources of pollution, spills, fish kills, and there's just been countless articles and news bulletins of like absolutely dire fish kills across the north in the past year, and that's only the past year. This has been going on for a long time.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it is interesting too that whenever am I right to say the thing that sparked this particular march? I may be wrong here, but was it the reports of the water companies in England? I'm talking about the national one. Obviously, we're just tying into that here. Was it the reports of the water companies in England, the bosses paying themselves record dividends and bonuses and stuff like that? Was that the motivation for this, or was this happening anyway? Because recently those companies have just, this past couple of weeks, really, yeah, well, maybe a bit more than that, have announced that the water bills are going to go up, and at the same time they're paying out record dividends to shareholders and bonuses to bosses.
Yeah, that's a good question, Andy. I actually don't know exactly the exact building blocks for the one in London, but I do know that in that with Fergal, that there was a lot with the elections in over in England. Um, they were hoping there would be a bit of a change with the new governance. That hasn't panned out,
Yeah,
and
same,
actually Labour have
same as
dropped
us
the
here.
ball. Yeah,
Same as us here.
exactly.
Yeah,
Um, and I think there's potentially, if new governance there was led to any change within the way water companies and what they were getting away with, if that was in any way affected, we might not see this much. I'm not sure about that, but
mhm,
it sounds like that there has not been any action really taken, same as over here. And as you say, the record profits, the record, bonuses that the CEOs are getting at water companies over there,
yeah.
absolutely contribute to the reasons for the march over there.
Yeah,
You know.
and then, just on that same theme, it is
Mhm.
it's not, I mean, people would maybe think that this is a coincidence. It is not a coincidence, it's the nature of the beast. One of our biggest company, I believe, Moy Park, not to pick on them exclusively, but they're the biggest.
Mhm.
They have also announced record turnover at just around the same time.
Yeah, no, it really is like mind-boggling how the two companies with the highest turnover in the north, you've got Cray Concrete. Well, they're now, I think, the most valuable company because they had a merger. These two construction firms who have a lot to do with the sand trade and sand dredging for construction. Um, so we've got that, and then we've got the likes of Moy Park. Both companies, two of the most valuable companies in the north, and two of the companies with record profit in the past year, have real big ties to the problems at Lough Neagh, and it really
Mm.
does expose, the problem. and it's dire. And yeah,
Yeah,
Moy Park is it's a whole. We could talk a lot just about Moy Park in itself. I'd
yeah,
just like to say that the protest, we did a protest at Moy Park a few months ago
yep,
with as part of the Save Lough Neagh campaign, with along with Shliela, and to tie in with the climate camp that we held at Arbo. And it was a great protest. It was great to have you there, Andy, especially. It was down on the south shore of Lough Neagh, one of the shores that have been hit so badly. And, for to have this huge factory there that is getting away with murder and ecocide, it was great to really do such a big stunt there. And it made the headlines. It
yeah,
it kind of went international, and I think it was worth it exposing Moy Park, because at that point they hadn't even reported record profit. At that point, there was people saying to us, "Oh, well, Moy Park, yes, they're guilty of these tax evasion problems, and they're guilty of all these environmental breaches, rule breaches, but their profits aren't that good." And then now we're hearing actually this year they've record profits. So it was really good that we got targeting them like that. And can go into more detail about Moy Park, but
yeah.
I'll not bore you.
Oh, no, well, we might get there, we might get there. Um, no, the protest that was, organised by Climate Camp and Shliela, I I was involved with that. We played some music, myself and Laura Cure went down to the Climate Camp at Art Bow, and we played some music. I think we opened the music side of things that evening, and it was a delight and a joy and an honor to be involved. And then it was, I don't know if it was, would it would be fair to be called a flash protest, sort of what developed over the weekend, and everyone decided then that they were going to go and have this protest at my park, which, as Paddy said, literally did go around the world. It was such a fantastic stunt, is really what it was. I don't know if you've seen the shots of the protesters with the green vomit, which was made up of food dye and porridge that was hastily bought out of local supermarkets and mixed up in buckets and stuff. I was very unsure because I've never been involved in anything like that. I go to protests and I would be like everybody else, and I would urge you, sort of putting our focus back on what's happening on Sunday. I would still feel a little uncomfortable. It's not my wheelhouse. It's not. I don't. I do genuinely, even though I'm a big sort of gobby mouthy person that has a podcast and goes on stage and plays music, I still find it very awkward. But they're brilliant, and you should go. And that one at Moy Park, I didn't understand exactly what this meant. These people I certainly didn't understand the potential it had to go, as you said, global, which it did. But these people were very, very intense, and they knew what they were doing, and it worked. And I would turn up at another one in the morning, despite any considerations that I might have. Um, so I would just urge anybody, if you're thinking about going for the March for Clean Water this Sunday, leaving from Raider Square in Belfast, and if you've got any sort of little, it's not really what I do. I'm a teacher. I'm a nicey. I don't do these things. It's not like that, and you will have you will feel all the better for it. And we need you to come. We definitely do need you to come. Um, Talking about, we'll get into the weeds a little bit now, Paddy, if you don't mind, about the economics of how this works. If people don't understand, and obviously you and I, being members of People Before Profit, we're coming from environmental socialism. That's where that's where we leave the starting line. But a lot of people maybe be put off by those words because of, I think, and I'm sure you'll agree, because of propaganda that has been
Mhm.
um, that people maybe have absorbed from the mass media over the years, over the course of their lives. But we need them to understand that the reason that the mechanics of it, that the reason that Moy Park is here, is a part of it is because it's allowed to just dump its effluent into Lough Neagh without having to pay for that. So then, whenever we come back and we point this problem out and we say to people, we need to fix this, the first thing that goes up is, "Oh, but what about the jobs?" And we're saying, as environmentalists and as socialists, not only do we not need to lose any jobs, we can make more jobs by cleaning the effluent before it gets into our literal drinking water. Do you wanna talk about that a little?
Yeah, absolutely, Andy. And yeah, so it's worth maybe talking about how Moy Park themselves even explain it, because there was a great
Yeah.
documentary, and I encourage everybody to watch it, The Lough Neagh Monster. I'm not sure, can't remember if you were in it, Andy, but
No.
I know Mary in the campaign was, and but yeah, some of the other members of the campaign were also interviewed. But it was a great expose on the fact that with these investigative journalists, they were able to find thousands of times that Moy Park had exceeded and breached environmental rules with trade effluent. So trade effluent being, a nice way to put liquid pollution. And when you think of where Moy Park, the Moy Park headquarters are in Dungannon, around Craigavon, they're so close to Lough Neagh, and they themselves, whenever they were, you know, um, pushed on this by the BBC, said, "Well, we're responsible. Yes, we're responsible for some of the discharge, but then NI Water is responsible for handling some of our trade effluent." So, they themselves, despite being a very rich private company, are also putting strain on our water service. And it's when you factor in the fact that Moy Park have dodged tax, there's a lot of you know uh, avoidance and loopholes that they're taking. It really just paints a really bad picture, where they're putting strain on our already underfunded water service, a water service that is the main crux of why we're doing this march. They're not paying their fair dues. They're becoming, they're now one of the most valuable companies in the north. It just doesn't, it's a perfect example of why we need to think about eco-socialism. That the profit-driven way that resources are used at the moment is just, it's leading to climate catastrophe. It's leading to environmental catastrophe, and I don't think you can divorce what has happened with Lough Neagh from the greed that has
Yeah.
caused it with the likes of Moy Park and others.
Yeah,
Hopefully that
and I think
answers that.
that's the thing that that word you used there, resource. I think people don't whenever we talk about capitalism and capitalists, they tend to say they tend to imply that resources are limitless. Limitless expansion on a planet with limited resources. It's protect over the course of their lifetimes, it might be limitless because what they do is use up until there's none left, move on. So they go
Mhm,
somewhere else just to do the same thing. And that's what these companies are going to do here. And I think that's what the people of Ireland don't understand. And I do use the word Ireland, regardless of whether you're a unionist or a nationalist, because the waterways don't recognize borders, as we know.
mhm,
And these companies, once they cannot dump their effluent anymore, will just leave and go somewhere else and use up their resources. That's why these companies are here. They didn't start here. They started somewhere else and moved here. And the reason they left there and moved here was because they destroyed there. And now they're going to destroy here. And not just to pick on Moy Park, they're not on their own, but they are, as you pointed out rightly, the biggest of them all. There are so many. And then it's tied in with the situation with NI Water, which is supposed to be our water management regulator and body, who are technically a private company. They work for profit. So they are responsible for millions of tons of legal spills. But because it gets passed on from private companies into NI Water, they just do it. And then it's considered okay because it's legal, which is
mhm,
absolutely insane. Then, furtherance to that, as you said, as we mentioned earlier, we've got our new government. And we've now got our new minister, Andrew Muir, who's come in into the again. I'm I'm saying these things as if I'm talking to an audience that don't know any of this stuff, Polly. So forgive me, and the audience, if any of you do know this stuff, please forgive me, but we're always trying to recruit new hearts and minds to the campaign. That's what we're all doing here. And
Mhm.
um, DERA, the Department of Environment, Agriculture and Rural Affairs, is all one department underneath the one minister, Andrew Muir, who has come in to the department and this, to be fair, has dumped into his lap an ecocide. And do you want to give us a little on the situation there?
Absolutely. Well, that's well said, Andy. And like, it should be noted that, yeah, we have, Stormont has been up and down, and that has also contributed in ways that the lack of governance and the lack of any sort of steer has some bearing on everything that's happened. But I think when we're talking about our government here in Stormont, we have to, look at how not only they've handled the Lough Neagh, but in the past, and the track record is horrible. I think we had a protest there recently announcing this March for Clean Water in Belfast at Stormont, and that was just before they were to announce the program for government, I think, and we were wanting them to put Lough Neagh on the agenda. But one of the key points was that Stormont is not just doing nothing; they have been for decades poisoning the loch, and it's not that they've just themselves, the politicians have been, dumping toxic fluids in, but the policies they have been advocating for and pushing have came at the expense of our environment. The policies they've been pushing all have the same common denominator as being for profit,
Yeah.
for growth, endless growth. That not one of those main five parties, the capitalist parties, sat down and thought for a second. Well, if we want, to keep incentivizing and keep pushing, what's going to be the consequences? And so, going for growth, this scheme that I know you've talked about on your podcast before, but just to briefly go over, it was the main five capitalist parties of Stormont all supported it, including Andrew Muir's Alliance Party. And it was around, I think it was 2016, or maybe before that, that this scheme really got legs. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong there, Andy. I think it was 2016.
It was
But anyway,
2016, yeah.
it's been about or just under 10 years or so. But essentially, what it was incentivizing for every square meter of farmland in the north, including the Loch Shore, uh, more farming, more intensive farming, more profit per square meter, and it seemed that there was absolutely no consideration for the excess nutrients that would come from that. It's kind of similar to the RHI scandal, actually, where it wasn't just that there was policy that opened the door to things. It was incentivizing pollution.
Yeah.
It would, just like with the RHI scheme. Stormont went out of their way to incentivize the destruction of our environment, and as much as Andrew Muir, and we'd be critical of the action plan that he's put out. I can go more into depth than that, but as much as uh, there's maybe a tendency to say, oh well, that was a mistake. Mistakes have happened time and time again, and we've got to look through what connects those mistakes, and it comes down to uh, putting profit before planet. And that is really what we're trying to get through here, is that there can't just be uh, you know, a small, there has to be a massive change in Stormont and the way that they treat our environment, because this happens time and time again. One environmental group, comes, gets something fixed, then it happens again somewhere else.
Yeah.
But there is, there are ties that bind all these terrible policies.
They're absolutely, and I'll add to what you're saying there for our dear viewer or listener, so that they can understand one of the policies that was introduced in the Going for Growth, actually, and whenever Paddy says incentivized pollution, one of the ways that that practically happened was that the fines that were implemented for if you were caught polluting, were so paltry that it was actually essentially environmentalists called it a polluter's charter, meaning that if you could afford to pay the fine, have at it. So yeah, so just on that, you mentioned the so Andrew Muir's much vaunted 37-point plan, which as soon as that was announced, my radar went up because we have a 5-point plan, and you could just see him going 37 points. That's more, so it's better. Without knowing that, without getting into the detail, but the leaders of the campaign, yourself and a few others, went through the plan fairly quickly and discovered immediately that it was, it was bullshit, and it was sort of teetering around the edges, saying sort of nice words to people that don't understand maybe the issues that are going on might think it actually means something, but essentially what it didn't do was threaten capital at all,
Yeah.
and, the pollution continues.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I'll just bring up the March for Clean Water leaflet that we're trying to get out far and wide, and we have on the back our main demands.
Mm,
Yeah, you're not going to be able to see through that camera with the light
but
shining through it.
that's
But
okay,
one of our
go through them, go through them.
Oh, great. Yeah, because I think it is just worth reiterating these main demands, and they remain largely unchanged from when we started when the Save Lough Neagh coalition came together last year. But yeah, right at the top, we've got the need for an independent environmental protection agency. As you say, Andy, the DERA is one department. So we've got agriculture and the environmental department merged into one. And it's very clear that does not work. And it's also very clear that our environmental agency does not have teeth to hold, especially agri-polluters, to account. And so that's why the need for an independent EPA, while it won't solve everything, and most countries already have one, is top of the agenda. And as well as that, fines for polluters, holding polluters accountable. So that's at the very top. And then we have a well-funded water service. Stormont, as we've discussed, has butchered so many parts of living here in the north. You see it with our NHS, but we also aren't as aware with how they have treated the water service. So NI Water is since the Good Friday Agreement, NI Water has been in this purgatory where it's not a public service, it's not fully in-house, but it's gotten less and less of a public service over the years, where now it's right in between public and private, and it's shifting more and more towards private.
Mhm.
And we have seen this happen before. We've seen it happen before in the south with the water charges, and it rings alarm bells, especially when you have the Alliance Party, who have a history of supporting water charges for working class and regular people. It rings alarm bells when we hear certain rhetoric, and it does sound like there might be worries to come down the line with our water service, and we've got to be prepared to fight them. And that is one of the other reasons that we want to have NI Water so central to the conversation, because it has been defunded. Decades of absolutely brutal cuts is why NI Water is not able to treat um, the sewage to the extent that they are. Now, there are problems with management. There are problems with the fact that it's ran as a private company. It's ran like it's ran for profit. They refer to us as customers, for example. Those all factor in, but the core is that it is almost divorced, from there's reports that even within departments in Stormont, they used to be able to communicate with the water service quite easily, but now it's gotten a lot harder. So yeah, that's the second point. And then third point is an end to the private ownership. I know this is a cause that has been close to your heart, Andy, and that you have raised a great deal of, publicity about. Go ahead.
Can we just well,
Mhm.
just briefly mention that, go on to
Stick
point 4
there.
because I wanna come back to point 3 as my final point, and then we'll say
Dead on.
goodbye to everyone. Is that alright?
Absolutely, Andy. So yeah, research and recovery is number 4. That's why we need a just transition to sustainable farming practices. We need the Lough Neagh research centres back at Trad Point and at the other side of the water. We need more research to be done and monitoring. And then number 5 is rights of nature. If we had rights of nature status for Lough Neagh, we would be able to fight and protect it from extraction, particularly sand dredging and other, real disastrous threats that's coming its way. And so that's another thing we're really fighting for, is to try get Lough Neagh rights of nature status. Yeah, so those are the main 5 points that we're marching for on Sunday.
Brilliant. And as you said, those points have remained largely unchanged, a little bit of crossing of T's and dotting of I's along the way, but yeah, and they get to the crux of the matter, which if we're gonna get to the crux of the matter, point 3 regarding the ownership of the loch is a
Mhm.
huge issue because not only for me is it the spiritual indicator of the beginning of the problems, but it's also a practical problem in so much as one of the things that a lot of people don't understand, and I'm talking to you, dear viewer, dear listener, is that we don't actually own the loch. We don't actually own
Mhm.
Loch. And you say, "What do you mean that we don't own it?" There's an earl who lives in England called the Earl of Shaftesbury, who has historically been his family since the early 1700s, and before that, the Earl of Chichester, who was a particularly horrible individual since the mid to late 1600s, starting with, in around the time of the plantation of Ulster. So, do you wanna give us a wee bit on the ownership and the earl and things like that, Paddy?
Absolutely. And actually, I've got a wee stack of books here, and I must actually send you a PDF of this one, Andy, but
Oh, please
I've probably
do.
mentioned it to you before. But it's called The Great Eel Robbery by
Oh,
Michael
no.
Farrell.
Haven't seen it.
You
Go on
haven't heard of
ahead.
that?
No.
Okay, well, this is good because I think you'll absolutely love it. And it's only a wee pamphlet, but it was published by the People's Democracy back in 1970, at the height of the when People's Democracy was formed. I'm sure a lot of listeners will know of many of the leaders, but we had the likes of Bernadette Devlin McCalskey, and Eamon McCann, and Michael Farrell, who was from Maherfelt here, was fighting for the loch, and they started a campaign against the Dutch ownership of licenses around Lough Neagh. And it really is a fascinating story, and you can actually find some parallels in terms of licenses, colonial licenses, with what's happening with the fishermen in Gaza at the moment. But basically, the fishermen here around the loch didn't own and didn't have the rights to fish. A Dutch company owned these licenses, and so the People's Democracy agitated and helped the fishermen to do protests. They even had a pirate radio going in Lough Neagh called Radio Free Lough Neagh, and they did occupations in a lot of the Dutch companies' buildings around Lough Neagh. And eventually, when that movement, which started around 1965, got momentum, it sort of built legs, and it carried a wee bit on. They didn't manage to get the demands all met during the People's Democracy campaign, but shortly afterwards, with many fishermen coming together to create a co-op, they actually did manage to get those licenses. Um, uh, to the people. So it's a great wee bit of history there, I think. But anyway, I'm on the tangent there. The reason I bring up the Great Eel Robbery is that at the time, Michael Farrell talks in the 1970s, as well as Bernadette did at the time, about the ownership of Lough Neagh. And it's clear that even when they were doing these rallies around Lough Neagh, marches around Lough Neagh, ownership, not just the licenses, but the ownership, decolonizing the ownership was top of the agenda. And that is why, we have to keep fighting as well to get the lock into public ownership with community management. It is that this is something that generations before have fought for. It is it is a colonial vestige that still lingers. Somebody abroad is profiting from the extraction and destruction of our lock, and yeah, I just think that if I could maybe just say just maybe a little line from here,
Yeah.
if I can find it. Uh, but almost every line from the People's Democracy on Lough Neagh at this time was great. But the Lough Neagh case is typical of the origin of most property in a capitalist society. It is just a little more glaringly unjust than the others. And I think that,
Yeah.
it is so succinct because it really is a landlord that we're talking about when it comes to the
Yeah.
Earl. He is an absentee landlord for what actually amounts to almost at the 33rd county of Ireland. Terence O'Neill had a cockamamie plan. You probably know this, Andy, but he actually once talked at Stormont about draining the loch and creating a new county. And that was something that actually came out of Terence O'Neill's mouth. And
Yeah.
but when you think about that amount of land, like, oh, sure, it's water, but that amount of land owned by a private landlord who
Yeah.
takes and is able to dictate so much, it is unjust. And yeah,
It's unreal for me that it's whether you're an Irish nationalist or a British unionist, the lock for me is the one of the many things I think that we should be that has the potential to unify us in a singular voice. It is so clearly unjust what is happening, what has happened over the years. I mean, I mean, my father was an eel fisherman. My cousins still are eel fishermen for all the eels that they get out of it. That they'll tell you all about it. My cousin Paul and Frankie and that and they barely get an eel out of it these days. It is the literal ecocide of 40% of our drinking water. If you want to be very practical about things, 40% of the drinking water for the north of Ireland or Northern Ireland, depending on your own choice of language, it doesn't matter. The fact is still the same. Uh, the fact that it is owned by an English lord, which whether you're a unionist or a nationalist, if you're a unionist, obviously this sort of stuff appeals to you. If you're a nationalist, it doesn't. But if you're a unionist, you have to understand that the fact that an English earl owns this and in his absence, he doesn't live here. He lives in Devon. And in his absence, it has been used to ecocide. Ecocide, what does that mean? It means our wading birds, our diving birds in the space of a decade have gone from 100,000 to 30,000. And I actually predict that 30,000 number is going to collapse in the next 5 years to a handful. The Lough Neagh fly, which you used to between depending whenever they appeared in the year, April to June, if you live around the loch, sure, you didn't put out your washing to dry in the summer. If you cycle or walk, you avoided the very shores of the loch because you would just be swallowing mouthfuls of these flies. And anybody that lives around the loch will tell you, as we all do, but that fly has not appeared this year. It doesn't exist now. The fishermen are putting out nets, 40, 50 nets and reporting back, as I heard one of the fishermen that spoke very well up at the protest up at Antrim a few weeks ago, says he put out 40 nets and got 6 fish. This is literal ecocide. There are going to be no fish, no birds, no flies, no creatures, no animals. It's going to be a sewer. You can't go for a walk around it. You can't go for a swim in it, as is very important to myself as well, but and to do with the campaign, Mary O'Hagan. who's a well-known dunker and swimmer, um, and we know that the importance of that, mentally and physically to so many individuals, thousands of individuals that swim in the
Yeah.
loch, and
Yeah.
then take all that into consideration, 40% of the water of the people, oh, so you say, "Well, what are you gonna do? You're gonna put a filter on your water tap," as we're doing literally this week. We've got a filter and a I took a look at it. I can't do it myself. A plumber's going to come and fit that for me. Eventually, that's not going to work. And then you say, well, you want to buy your water in plastic bottles. Well, you have to deal with microplastics and then the disposal of those plastic bottles as well, which environmentally is another frigging disaster that's going on that we don't seem to be able to do
Yeah.
too much about. So, what I mean to say is, in the mouth of this ecocide, and this is what it is. We're losing all these jobs, all these fishermen aren't working anymore. These thousands of years of tradition are all gone. It's gone. We know this. It only takes one generation to forget for something to go forever. Then after that, it's a museum piece, and we're just making it up as we go along. It's gone. These fishermen are finding other jobs right now. It's over, and all those problems all compound down into ecocide. And this is why the solutions that have to come forward may feel quite extreme. But whenever you present the problem, you can see, like when you present it like that, you can see that tinkering around the edges and 37 point fucking about isn't going to do it.
Yeah. And just to add to that, Andy, that yeah, I think the most apart from the total exemption or the total leaving out of the Independent Environmental Agency, which it really does boggle the mind how even at this point, and with Andrew Muir as the environmental minister, how there still isn't the how that still isn't on the agenda, and that's really why we have to keep fighting as well, because with an independent environmental agency, we could agitate for tougher fines and all on polluters, but yeah, it is. Sorry, I've forgotten with the last point that you made there, Andy. I just went on one there with the
Oh,
Independent Environmental
no,
Agency,
no,
but
no. Well, that's what I mean. Just to say that the frigging about around the edges isn't enough.
yeah,
It's going to take
sorry.
strong action.
Most of the 37-point plan is about education. Like, I mean, it really that does not fit the bill. It at the moment, like we need fines at the moment. You know, the old fines that Edwin put slashed have not been brought back, and that would immediately cut down and have an impact on pollution. But even that small action has not been taken.
Yeah.
So the the time has passed for just like a passive sort of like, oh, let's sort of educate people, or let's tell people to not pour this down their drain or not use this type of detergent. The time is needed for major systemic change. We have to change the power imbalance between nature and greed and profit and planet, and yeah, it really is impacting us on more and more ways, like around here in South Derry, and I'm sure down in Lurgan, it was similar. The tap water, it tastes like moldy, and
Mm.
it's only recently sort of started to go back to normal. But like, in what country? Like, I mean, would that not be a catastrophe? Like, we're told that, and I do believe by and large, it's mostly safe enough. But there are scientists raising alarm that there could be small amount of untested um, nutrients and chemicals within the water, and that should be cause for massive alarm. It may not lead to immediate health impacts, but if there's even a possibility of it leading to any long-term health impacts, that is a total calamity. And I know many of people, my family included, around the loch, that just do not drink tap water anymore
Yeah.
and do not trust it. And that's understandable, but as you rightly say, that is also adding to more plastic, more stuff to be recycled if it even gets recycled. So it is just it's hard to comprehend and to overstate this. And I do think that just even with many of us around Lough, some people don't want to come to terms with how bad the disaster is, because
Yeah.
when you think about like Dr. Les Gornall, and he says 20 years, that's if pollution is entirely cut right now, entirely
Yeah.
cut, which it isn't. 20 years, that's almost too much to comprehend,
Yeah.
and drastic change, political change will need to happen for even that to happen. That we do yeah, have to keep it in people's heads, and to give people the show people you can stand up. And the March on Sunday is another example, but there's many other ways people can stand up for their environment and agitate locally and put pressure on the representatives. Consider more next time, who has a good track record on prioritizing our environment, and also, yeah, join join campaigners like Friends of the Earth, who've been stalwarts in this for decades, and really make sure that our government here, that we at the Lough Shore will not be, you know, second a second thought. We demand to be listened to. We demand to have clean water that we can swim in, that we can drink. We shouldn't be, you know, uh, stuck in a place where those of us with a little bit of with the capacity are able to ensure that we buy bottled water, but there's plenty of people around the Lough Shore that can't afford that, and that really is a horrible way of things. And many of the political representatives here have not even broached the topic yet.
Yep.
Yeah.
And on that, we'll end it, Paddy. Thank you so much for joining
Right.
me. Um, we'll just remind people that we're to join us at the March for Clean Water. I'll be there. Paddy will be there. All the other campaigners will be there this Sunday, leaving from Ryder Square in Belfast at 2 p.m. and just marching around the corner to City Hall. And we've got a few speakers which will be who will be talking to us. And I would urge you, please, to share this interview, share these messages, share these words. And if you've never been to a protest before, if you're unsure about it, please come along. Just turn up, join in, come and introduce yourself to me or Paddy or anybody else. If you need us to hold your
Absolutely.
hand, or if you want to walk with us and have a chat, and we'll keep you right. It's all good. It's all we're there. We're there in a spirit of companionship and brotherhood and sisterhood. And we want you to come. We need you to come, and we want you to continue spreading the message and spreading the word and letting people know that our loch is dying, if not dead, and we want to save it. So thank you, Paddy. Appreciate you for giving me your time on this Wednesday morning, I think it is. And
I had to check there as well.
yeah, I had to look at the computer there. I'll see you up at Ryder Square on Sunday.
Brilliant, Andy. And yes, thank you so much for having me. And thank you as well for your campaigning for the Lough. It's so good as well, and so important to have voices around every corner of the Lough Shore. So yeah, thank you, Andy. And I hope to see many people there on Sunday at 2 p.m. Ryder Square for the March for Clean Water.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paddy.
Thanks, Andy.